just being able to see everything from high up and having that sense of freedom and being able to go to the other side of the Falklands in a short space of time wouldn't happen on land. So yeah, it's pretty special. So I started my training in February of 2022. So it was 21 months training, split fairly equally between Oxford in the UK and Spain. So it was pretty intense. So the old brain got quite a workout at the start because 6 to 7 months of ground school to start with before you even get in a plane. So yeah, lots of maths and physics and stuff which I hadn't done for 12 years or whatever. For the first time on my own, you're concentrating that much on getting everything right. As soon as I landed, it was a very cool feeling. Yeah, first solo landing was, yeah, I'll never forget that. Since then, yeah, come back and probably about another year line training and stuff before I'm allowed solo with passengers. I cannot wait to just do that first passenger flight wherever or whoever it is. But yeah, it'll be that first solo passenger flight will be very special, I think.
We used to pour the fuel into the plane in a big funnel with a chamois leather in it to filter out the water, and it was just poured in. On a strong wind, you got more petrol blowing over everybody else, but it worked okay. When I first arrived, Figas was fairly well established with 2 float planes. They had 2 beavers, one silver one and one red one. They used to land at Fox Bay, and every time the Darwin came from Montevideo with the mail, within the next couple of days, the plane flew around dropping mail to all the settlements. The mail was put in that weighted sack, either a brick or stone or something into weighted. The pilot used to hang out the window and just drop it and land it on the green. And they were surprisingly good at it, actually. We had a pilot who wasn't quite so familiar. He let it go and it got stuck on the float. And he leaning out the window, hooking it off the float with somebody's fishing rod. They really were the lifeblood of the camp, really, because it was our only communication. It was a really good thing that they actually established it, because before that we were still in the 19th century, really. The Falklands would be a different place if it wasn't for Figas, particularly the islands.
I met Jeff when I was 17. I first saw him playing rugby down at the old Eliza Cove tip that it is now.
I arrived in the Falklands in 1976 with the Royal Marine Detachment, and then subsequently married Bernadette in January of 1977, and we decided for our honeymoon to fly out to Volunteer Point for the week.
So we flew out on the Beaver, but to go down to the hangar at the end of Ross Road, took off from the harbour, and about 2 minutes later we were at Volunteers because it's just across the hill.
We were dropped off in the lagoon by Jim Kerr, who was our pilot, and as it gets quite shallow in the lagoon, different states of tide, I actually waded ashore with Bernadette on my back, and we went into the shanty there for the week.
We were just told to be down at the lagoon at 10 o'clock in the morning next Friday.
Well, I could tell from the weather forecast it wasn't too good and not really doable. At that point in time, nothing turned up. We gave it an hour or so, thought, well, that's it. All we can do is come back in 24 hours' time.
And then we went off and did our own thing for the rest of the day and waited for the plane to come the following day. So we had an extra day. That was fun too.
To actually land in Volunteer Lagoon was kind of special. I mean, if people could do it today, they would love to do it, but of course we don't have beaver float planes anymore, which was a bit of an experience in itself.
It was kind of an accident. It wasn't something that I thought of before, but I joined the retained fire service and really enjoyed it, so it kind of spiralled from there. I've been a firefighter for 7 years in the domestic fire service, and then I made move to Figas. We're obviously here to provide fire cover just in case anything happens at the airport. We're also the first aid, so we're all medically trained to first response emergency care. We do all the runway checks and bird scares. We help load the plane, so we do all the baggage handling, so that loading and unloading of the planes as well as they come in. The people really make the job at Figas worth it. It's a really nice place to work. Figas is a really vital service in the Falklands, and obviously with the Concordia Bay we keep everyone connected. So as well as bringing people in, we take animals and freight and everything else. We do lots of things to help lots of people, and it's really nice to kind of remember all the stories and everything that we've done in the last 75 years.
My first beat was for charters, and I actually caught the beaver off at the government jetty. And I went all over the place basically. After I spent about the first 18 months in charters, then after that they were shorter teachers, and they used to sort of move us around quite frequently. The pilot, Ian, used to deviate sometimes just to have a look at something, and of course I was keen on doing that anyway. Ian would sort of look down and say, "Oh, well, have a look at this island." So he would nip down on the water and have a look for 5–10 minutes, and then nip back up. But that was Ian. You get an aerial view of the landscape and it changes it completely. Probably the most interesting landing was at Sedge Island. That was right in the ocean basically. It's very isolated, north of Carcass Island. I think Bert Conchie was the pilot at the time, and yeah, we took 2 or 3 goes to get down, you know, because there was quite a swell running as well. So yeah, it was a bit hairy, I suppose you could say. Figas is still a vital piece of the operation we have in the Falklands, and it will be for a very long time. To the west and the outer islands, it's very, very important. Well, I enjoy the Islander, but I do miss the Beaver, because that was a superb plane. You know, single engine, you're on the water. I just enjoyed taking off and landing on the Beaver. And you're in there with the pilot sometimes in the co-pilot seat, and you have a good conversation. Just good fun it was, that's all it was basically.
There's definitely a constant adrenaline to it, just keeping you sharp, because you have to be. You're constantly making decisions based on weather or what's ahead or other traffic and things, and thinking ahead all the time. There's a feeling of freedom to it, especially being single crew. You are completely in charge of your own destiny and the destiny of the passengers on board. The wind is the predominant factor, I guess. It's almost a constant. There are days where you're sort of flying and the wind's getting up as you're out there, so you're getting up close to the limits and coming in sort of with 40+ knots of wind. The Islander is a pretty amazing aeroplane for its size in a crosswind. We've proven it way beyond 40 knots in days when the weather's just caught you out and it's deteriorated. There are times where the conditions do get so bad when you're out there that you have to bail and come back. The important thing there is the pilot makes the right decision at the right time. I think it's important to remember the legacy of all the people that have worked for Figas over the years and made those various developments along the way. We're actually extremely proud these days of how many Falkland residents that we employ and make up the workforce here, and how we've developed all of those employees. Everybody has to work really close together, and we learn from each other all the time as well, which is really nice.
I have done about 20 years in total. In the first years I was here as an observer, we were doing 10 fishery flights a week, so there was 2 observers. You would be out 6–7 hours at a time, and at that time as well there was a lot of poaching going on, so you would fly past boats at sea and see little men hanging off the end of it, painting out number plates and trying to redo names. So that was always quite fun.
On a day-to-day basis, we have to provide the pilots with varying information. There's been a lot of training on MET, so the weather and what kind of weather we get coming through the aerodrome. We've also been doing radios, talking to the pilots on a regular basis with updates on any information that they might require. We've been doing flight planning and getting the daily schedules out, doing the load sheets for the pilots and that kind of thing.
A couple of years ago, you know, if you had an aircraft out and about and you lost comms with it, it was sort of, do you initiate overdue action? But now we've got the spider tracks, it is a lot easier to track them.
The logistics of doing aviation in a small island is very different to what you would get elsewhere. So to know the flexibility that Figas has and being able to deal with that is very rewarding.
It feels very satisfying to know that you're doing a good job and that you're doing it to the best of your ability. But it's also very scary as well, because if you ever had an incident, then you know that it's on your head, that you're the one that's got to activate the emergency plan. So yeah, it's a very rewarding job.
We got a call in the hospital to say that somebody had been seriously injured in the hall, and could they send the plane with the doctor. There was a 2-nighter going on in one of the settlements on the west. The message we were getting from the ground was the patient was deteriorating, and so we went out on the plane. Evening was coming on, Unfortunately, there was quite a headwind and we didn't get there before nightfall. And so a decision had to be taken as to whether we should land at night or whether we should abort, go back and call the helicopter. So the pilot took a decision that they would land, and they asked people in the settlement, people at the two-nighter, to line up their Land Rovers so that the headlights were shining down the runway. And so we went ahead, we landed safely, and we took off safely and got back, and the patient did very well. But again, I think that shows just how Figas have pulled out all the stops, put themselves at risk, so that we can offer a service to camp residents so that they don't come to harm. I'm sure there'll be people sitting here in another 75 years telling similar stories about what the modern Falklands gets from the latest iteration of Figas.
I was passionate about aircraft, but it was more about flying the aircraft. And I wanted to be a fighter pilot, to tell you the truth. But in Guyana it's very expensive, so my mom said the best she can do is factor an engineering course. And I said, I'll accept, and I love it. Figas was chosen for me. I didn't choose it. I got my son, and I was working in the big industry at the time. Working in a big industry means you've got hectic hours. Being a new mom, having a newborn, working hectic hours wouldn't do for him, and I was a single mom as well. So I decided to come down to smaller aircraft, which will reduce the amount of workload and will give me time with him. I sent my CV out to recruiting agencies around the world, and one day I got a call asking if I want to come work in the Falklands. I get to learn new things every day. I'm on my feet, I'm thinking here as an engineer, so I prefer that aspect of life and work.
Sometimes, if the weather was bad, it was a bit of a thing having to go down that jetty in a gale of wind or a snowstorm. I worked at Figas from 66 to 73. I was the secretary. Our office was on the end of the government jetty, and it had windows looking west, so we could see the planes take off. The office was just Jimmy and myself. We had a very bad winter, and I'd gone to work in the morning, and by lunchtime the snow was drifting everywhere and we couldn't get the hangar doors open for 2 or 3 days. It was just nice to get the odd flight out with the pilots when there was only one flying and somebody could be in the office. I enjoyed that. I just enjoyed seeing loads of people coming in to book flights or all that sort of thing. That was good.
We have main wheel tyres and we also have nose wheel tyres. We order approximately 30 per year. Yeah. And in the summer seasons we get through a lot of tyres. Yeah. Lots of flying means lots of tyres. So I've been at Figas for 6 years. I'm originally from St. Helena. I was looking for a job overseas. I hadn't been away from home to work before, and I heard about the Falkland Islands and what a nice place it was to work and live, and so I decided to check it out. So I'm the technical stores officer, so I basically am responsible for all of the parts that is required for the aircrafts. I think this is the job that I want to be in. Whenever a part comes into our stores, I have to book it in and attach a serviceable label to every part. So this label here tells us the part number, the description of the part, a batch number. Everything has a batch number. We try to keep at least one of each of the parts in the stores because you never know what's gonna break and when it's gonna break. The parts are very expensive here. Something that can fit in my hand could be like £3,000 to £5,000. An example of a small part that's quite expensive is this piece for a wheel. One like this can cost anything from £1,600. That's just a part of the wheel. It's different. I haven't worked in aviation before. It's interesting. You're learning new stuff every day. You never know. One day I may become an engineer or a pilot.
So I could one day be working on an engine and then undercarriage or the airframe, tail wing, so it's always different. When I was in school we had a week of work experience and I had the opportunity to work at the fire department and the airport here, and then one of the engineers came over and said, come and have a look inside the hangar and see what it's all about, and I just never looked back, and from that moment I just knew I wanted to work in aviation. I've always wanted to do some sort of hands-on work, just don't know what you're going to be doing on a day that you come in.
At the moment we're doing a full upgrade on Bravo November. Basically what that involves is we do a complete strip out of all the components that were in here originally, so all the old pneumatic gauges and things, and we're replacing it with screens, so it's all touchscreen. I'll be honest, a lot of it is the looking at it afterwards, because a lot of the avionics stuff is it's all to do with the wires and everything, and when you pull everything apart, it looks a mess. It looks a right mess when it's apart. Once it's all working, just all screens light up, all the data you need is there. It's a pretty good feeling.
It's a really good bunch of guys here. I mean, I've known some of them for longer outside of work, and my dad works here as well, so that's really good. But everyone gets along really well. Everyone's incredible.
The team here has been absolutely brilliant. At first, when I started, I sort of struggled a lot with, a lot of it is technical terms. The team has just been absolutely phenomenal with helping me figure out what's what does, what goes where. I'll be honest with you, it's quite an honour being taught by these guys.
That was just an experience I'll never forget. And after Christmas, Dad decided that he would try and get on the Austria, so he actually became the first fare-paying passenger. They came out to charters, and I think it was probably 7. While nobody was looking, I snuck onto the aeroplane, and when Vic Spencer came round, I said, "Please, Mr. Spencer, will you take me to Stanley?" And he said, "No, come on, you out." And I must have looked so crestfallen that he looked at it and he said to my dad, "Keith, can I take this brat for a trip and might put him off?" And so he did, and I had a 10-minute flight around charters. I'm absolutely hooked on aeroplanes and flying ever since. Well, I was absolutely mesmerised. I must have bored people about it for days afterwards. By the time I came back from school, they were flying Norsemans, and then of course the trusty Beaver, so that was a lovely aeroplane to fly in. I just love flying, and I love flying in and out of charters, and I had my own Cessna 172 for 20 odd years. I had the best of it, I think, and it was, I just loved it. Flying myself, frightened myself a few times, but I survived.
The whole of Figas really revolves around teamwork. There's no one individual part that can really operate without the rest. So, be it the people in the tower, the check-in staff, the firemen, the refueler, the engineering staff. I initially joined Figas back in '89 because I was actually working for PWD, and I was digging a trench for a power cable up here, and I came in and had a look around, and they were busy working on the aircraft, and I thought, oh, this looks all right. Day-to-day flying is engineer and fitters will come in, we'll do a pre-flight inspection on the aircraft, which involves cleaning the windows off, doing a fuel sample check on each of the fuel tanks on each aircraft, check for any water or contamination of the fuel. The engineer will then walk around the aircraft, make sure that there's nothing wrong with the aircraft, and it's ready to hand over to the pilot. So we'll sign the aircraft off to the pilot, pilot comes along and then they'll do another inspection, their inspection before the aircraft is taken away from the hangar. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes that generally people wouldn't get to see. There's a lot to do, and there's a lot of maintenance involved in keeping the aircraft in the air.
Sedge Island, which is some miles off to the north of Saunders Island. The pilot landed there once. The beaver decided it was too rough to take off, so he taxied all the way to Cardiff for 3 hours. 2 young children on board who were violently ill. So that was a bit of an experience for the people on the aircraft that day. The beaver was great, it was exciting, and they landed all over the place. Probably my last flight in a beaver aircraft was from Darwin School. I worked as an electrician, and we got into very heavy snow showers. When we got close to Stanley, the pilot had to land. We landed over the other side of Eliza Cove, close to Port Harriet. We waited there for probably half an hour, just taxiing round until the snow cleared off, and then we took off and hopped over Sap Hill and landed at Stanley. Another thing they did was mail drops. They'd actually fly down low over the settlement. The pilot would actually throw the bag of mail in through his side window. Once they landed, a bag of mail came through the roof of one of their conservatories, the greenhouse or something, but that was not a great service, to get mail. They've done a fantastic service over the last 75 years. They've got to be proud of what they've done, everybody involved, and it's really great they're doing the 75th anniversary in some way or other.
It was such an amazing experience to go down the harbour, and to take off and to see Stanley getting smaller and smaller as a child. It was just amazing. Me and my twin brother Jared, we used to go to Darwin School from Dunnes Head on the Beaver. Nobody had suitcases because it would take up too much space. We used to take our clothes with us in a wool bag. So you got on the plane with your bag of clothes ready for the term at Darwin School. It's still such a lovely experience. I love flying. I love going on the Islander. I'd love to have the Beavers back. This job was advertised as a Flight Information Service Officer up at Stanley Airport. So I went for an interview and I got the job, and I absolutely loved it. I loved doing the weather in the mornings when I first went in. That was my first job in the mornings, to switch all the radios on and then phone around the 5 different camp stations. One person in particular said to me once that he had a Paddy's Hurricane there, and I said, oh my goodness, it's really calm everywhere else. And he said, yes, that's what that means. And another time he said to me, I'm holding the cow's tail and I can't see her head. And that meant it was foggy. Everybody who works there is amazing, honestly. Everybody's like a little piece of a jigsaw that fits into place. And it really fits into place well.
I come from the Isle of Wight, so I'm an Islander. And I first came down to the Falklands just after the conflict in 1983. I'm an aircraft technician, mainly structural work. I was brought up in the Britten-Norman factory. The Britten-Norman were building 2 aeroplanes, and we had to take them apart, put them in boxes and ship them down. And I was asked to join the crew. Yeah, it's a big adventure for me. Part of my life is travel, and what a way to come down. Since '83, there was a massive, massive gap. And then 2008, I was invited down to do some repairs and never stopped. But if there's any structural damage, like we get a goose strike on the wing or heavy landing, repairs, that's what I do. And maintaining aircraft is complicated, because we're transparent in everything. We just can't go and put a bit of metal on, it might be from a baked bean can. So everything's sort of, it's logged and got a massive store system. We're 8,000 miles away from the supply chain. So we've got to look after ourselves. I say I am an outsider, but I'm almost a Falkland Islander. The Falklands is like Marmite. You either love it or hate it, and I love it.
Certainly made you concentrated your mind and made sure that the job you was doing was done to the best of your ability. Preparing the aircraft for the daily flight, we used to have to run the aircraft up, refuel them, and then roll the aircraft down to slip way into the water. One of the first things I remember was when they flew the first 2 Beavers down here. One of them come in with the bird strike. It had hit a a turkey vulture at 7,000 feet. Number one job on that aircraft was to actually do a repair on the wing. We had a good team camaraderie. We got on very well together. We used to not only work together but socialise together. We always took things cautiously. We'd done things in a regulated manner. It was always nice after we'd done deep maintenance on an aircraft and rolled it out of the hangar, done the run-ups and done the flight test and declared it fit for operation and that. We was always on a high after that. The team that we had in the past and the team we've got today, to be congratulated for their dedication and that to maintaining Figas.